just talked. So it is a joint work with Olivia. The cause is to try to apply concretely the generalized Galois formalism, which comes from its topos-theoretic interpretation. So this is why I have this title is slightly different from the title I had previously given. And here I have just copied on the blackboard the examples which were already given by Olivia. But in fact, these are just examples. So, in fact, I think you have already understood, and I hope it will become even more clear in this talk, that this formalism is so general that it can be applied, in many mathematical situations. In fact, I would say almost every time we have a notion of embeddings or of submersion, a notion of immersion, of submersion. So you see that here I immediately have, just as Olivia had done, separated the examples into two families. There are the families of embeddings and the family of submersion. So, as I am a geometer, I will use the same notations as Olivia, but replacing C with C opposite and C opposite with C. Because for Olivia, C was the category of extensions of a field, whereas for me, as I was brought in algebraic geometry, C is the category of the spectrum of this extension field. So this means that the arrows are in the other direction. So this means that when I consider submersions, for me it will be a category C, and when I consider immersions, it will be the opposite of a category C. Okay. So, what do I want to do? So there are mainly two objectives for this second talk. The first objective is to describe concretely what Olivia has called the atomic completions. What Olivia has explained in her talk is that under some extremely general conditions, the category C with this choice can be sent in a topos which is defined as the topos of sheaves on C with the atomic topology, okay? And in all the cases under consideration, these toposes prove to be Galois, so I can denote them in this way or in this way. So these are the toposes of discrete sets endowed with a continuous action of a topological group, which, as has been remarked, can be supposed to be endowed with a pro-discrete topology. Okay. More precisely, inside this topos EG, there is a subcategory, a full subcategory, which maybe I can define in this way. This is the category of atomic objects. So they correspond to the subcategory consisting of actions of the group which are transitive. Okay? And it happens that in the general construction of Olivia, in fact, the functor from C to the category of sheaves factorizes through the category of atoms. And under the hypothesis, which is the fact that the arrows in C are strict epimorphism. So under this hypothesis, this functor is a fully faithful embedding, but it may happen, and in fact, in all the cases, the examples I have written here, it happens that this is a fully faithful embedding, but it is not an equivalence. So this means that here some new objects appear. We don't have new morphism, which means when we have two objects here, the morphisms there are the same as the morphism between the image objects, but we have new objects, which Olivia has called imaginaries. So maybe we say that the objects which come from C can be called the real objects, and the new objects can be called the imaginary objects. And so the first purpose of this talk will be to describe concretely the atomic completions, which mean to describe this category as concretely as possible in terms of that category. So this is the first purpose. And the second question I want to mention is the question of building morphism between these Galois toposes. Of course, I want morphism to be associated to geometric arrows in the categories you start with. So, and as soon as we will have morphism of toposes, of course, it will imply that we have associated cohomological invariants. Okay, and in fact, in the cases I have written here, for instance, in the case of groups, this theory will yield new cohomological invariants of finite groups, which have characteristic zero coefficients, which is, I think, is completely new in the theory of groups, because what we are used to look at are what is classical is cohomological invariants with finite characteristic, where the characteristic divides the number of elements of the group. But here there will be new cohomological invariants. Okay. First, I want to describe concretely the atomic completion. So the idea to do that was given by Olivia in her talk. It is the fact that if you consider an atom of the topos, then it can be covered by an object coming from C, and more precisely, it can be written as a quotient of this object coming from C by an equivalence relation. And the equivalence relation is a subobject of the product of this object with itself, and as a subobject, it can also be covered by objects coming from C. So, you see that here we have to consider one object coming from C, then the product of the object with itself, and we are saying that we are considering sub-object of this square, which are equivalence relation. But equivalence relation have to be reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. And the transitivity property has to do with the fact that you are considering products of three objects, not only two, but three. So this is why I am going to introduce the following notion. Okay, so maybe it is first a lemma. So, but before I introduce this lemma, I want to say what is the general setting for this lemma to be true. So we consider such a category C, and we suppose, as my notations are the opposite of the notations of Olivia, I suppose that the opposite of C verifies what she has called the amalgamation properties. The amalgamation property means that if you have three objects like this, then you can complete this square in a commutative square, and that's all. So this is, you just verify, you just suppose that C opposite verifies amalgamation property, and because of this, you can undo the category C with the atomic topology. So the atomic topology is a Grothendieck topology where any arrow is a covering. Okay? And then this property is enough to say that this defines a Grothendieck topology on this category. So you don't make any extra hypothesis. So by now we can consider the topos of sheaves on this category, and this topos happens to be an atomic topos. For this atomic topos to be Galois, you will need some extra conditions on C, but here I don't even suppose that. The only hypothesis is that this category C op verifies this property. So what does it mean for this topos to be atomic? What does it mean? It means that any object of this topos, so I call it E, any object of E is a disjoint sum of atoms. And what is an atom? An atom is an object which is non-trivial, so it is not the initial object of the topos, and doesn't contain any non-trivial subobject. So its only subobjects are the initial object, the empty object of the topos, and itself. Okay? Of course, in mathematics, we are used to consider such situations. For instance, in the context of representations, of linear representations of a group, the analogous notion is the notion of irreducible representation. A representation which does not contain any non-trivial sub-representation. Okay, so in fact, the first observation, which Olivia already explained in her talk, is the fact that when you have a Galois topos, a topos which is equivalent to the category of continuous actions of a group, then such a topos is atomic. Because when you have a set endowed with the action of a group, you can write it naturally as a disjoint union of the orbits. Okay? So this is a topos theoretic notion, and it makes sense for a topos to be atomic in this sense. Okay, so we have this atomic topos, and so because of that, we can consider E hat embedded in E, which is the full subcategory of the topos consisting of the atoms. Okay, and so what we want to do is to describe the category of atoms from the category C. Okay? So it will apply in particular in these cases and in many others. Okay, so here is in this situation, here is the lemma. Okay, so in this lemma, we first okay, so the lemma is the following. First, you choose a finite family of objects of the category C. And you consider families of rows of chosen object D to these objects C1, C2, Cn. Okay, so you are interested in families of sub-objects. Okay, and suppose that by now you have two such families. Okay, F1, Fn, from an object D to donc C1, C2, Cn, and you have another such family from another object D prime to the same object C1, Cn. You consider two such families of arrows from a single object to a family of n objects you have chosen. And then you say, so this is the definition, that F1, Fn is equivalent to F'1, F'n, if and only if there exists another object E together with two morphisms to D and D prime, maybe you call them G and G prime, such that when you compose F1, Fn with G and F'1, F'n with G prime, you obtain the same arrows. Such that, so this is Fi composed with G equals F'I composed with G prime for any I between 1 and n. Okay, so you define such relation, and in this, so the first part of the lemma is the fact that this defines an equivalence relation. Okay, so of course, in order to prove it, you just need the only fact you use is the amalgamation property for the opposite category. So this is an easy, I am not saying at all that the lemma is difficult, it is very easy. Okay, so you have such an equivalence relation, so you may talk about the equivalence classes. Okay, and you call the equivalence classes the components of C1 cross Cn. Of course, it is here it is just a notation. I am not saying at all that in the category C, the products of objects are defined. So it is just a notation. But so I call that the components of C1 cross Cn. What is the reason for giving this name? It is the following fact. It is the fact that, of course, in the situation I have described, starting from the category C, you have the Yoneda functor to the category of pre-sheaves on C, and then you have the sheafification functor to the topos of sheaves on C with atomic topology, and so this is the natural functor, the canonical functor, which Olivia has denoted L. And of course, what you can do starting from the object C1 cross Cn is to take their images in the topos. Okay? So, and in the topos, this is extremely important, in the topos, all computations have a meaning. In particular, in a topos, you can consider products, and so it has a meaning to consider this product in the topos. You see, in the initial category C, this did not have a meaning, but it has a meaning in the topos, okay? And this is an object of the topos, and I said that this topos is atomic. So, you know that this object of the topos is a disjunct union of atoms. And so what I am trying to do by now is to describe concretely the atoms of the product. And in fact, the components here, what I have defined, are exactly, so this is a concrete descriptions of the atoms of the topos. Okay. So this is the reason for introducing this definition. By now, of course, with this definition of components, there are some obvious functorial properties. So, first, consider these objects, C1, C1, on a map from a set 1K to the set of indices 1N. Okay? So, if you have a collection of map Fi from an object D to the Ci's, then you can associate to them the collection of the F index alpha of J to the C alpha of J. Okay, so for any J between Y and K. And of course, this defines a map from the set of components of C1 cross Cn to the set of components of C alpha of 1 cross C alpha of K. So here I am saying something completely obvious. So if you have an equivalence relation here, of course it induces an equivalence relation there. So it is completely tautological. So
you wrote alpha is equal.
Alpha, oh yes, no, it is just a map, an arbitrary map. Okay, it is an arbitrary map. Of course, the cases I am interested in first the case when alpha is a permutation. Okay, so it is useful to be able to change the order of the coordinates. And the second step, the second thing I am interested in is when here you have an injective map. So what is, in that case, what is this thing? It just means that you are forgetting some of the components. So for instance, I would be interested into, you see, it can be an interesting case is when C1, Cn are all the same. So I just talked about C cross C cross C, and of course there are three projections from C cross C cross C to C cross C, and I will be interested into this. So, this was point 2 of the lemma, and there is a point 3, which is also an obvious point. It is the following. By now, suppose that you have a collection of arrows in the category C, which goes from our object Ci's to some other objects Bi's. So you suppose you have such a collection for all I between 1 and n. And by now, if you have a collection of map from some object D to the Ci's, okay, you can associate to that. So these maps, you call them GIs, so I have already written it. So you just compose. Okay. Excuse me, this is BI. Okay. For I between 1 and n. And of course, this once again defines a map from the components of C1 cross Cn to the components of B1 cross Bn. Okay, so I am writing something completely obvious. Yes. Okay. Okay. So with this lemma, we can begin to build our atomic compression. For this, we need to introduce what we mean by a relation. Okay. So I already told you that these equivalent classes have to correspond to atoms, but you see that the definition of the equivalent classes don't use at all the topos. It is entirely defined in terms of the category C. Okay, so by now I give the following definition. So under the same, in the same general setting. Let's consider two objects of the category C, and a relation R of C1 cross C2 is, by definition, a subset of the set of components of C1 cross C2. Okay, this is just the definition of relation. By now, suppose that we have a relation R of C1 cross C2 and a relation R prime of C2 cross C3. Okay, so I suppose I have two relations. These are just two subsets of two subsets of C1 cross C2 of two subsets of the set of components of C1 cross C2 and C2 cross C3. By now, I want to define an associated composed relation R prime R prime composed with R. So it has to be a relation of C1 cross C3. So how is it defined? You consider the triple, the components of C1 cross C2 cross C3 together with their three projection maps to C2 cross C3, so maybe I call that P1, to C1 cross C3, I call that P2, and to C1 cross C2. Okay, and what is R prime composed with R? So it has to be R prime composed with R has to be a relation of C1 cross C3, so a subset of the set of components here. So how is it defined? I have to take the direct image by So this means just the image by P2 of the converse image, the pullback by P1 of R prime. So R prime is a subset of the set of components here. So it has a meaning to consider the pullback. And here I take the intersection with the pullback with by P3 of R. Okay, and this is the definition. If we had a set, it would be the obvious definition of the composed relation. Here we are instead of sets, we just have equivalence classes, which in our mind are toposes, are atoms. Okay, so we do that, and by now we are able to define the notion of equivalence relation. So an equivalence relation on an object C is a relation R on C cross C such that the three obvious properties are verified, so it has to be reflexive. So reflexive means it contains a diagonal. Okay, so this means that you have this row from C to you see it contains the component which consists in the pair of identity rows from C to C to C. Okay, this is 2 times the identity component. Okay, this has to belong to R. The second property is the fact that it is symmetric. So what does it mean? It means it is stable under permutation of the 2 coordinates. You exchange the 2 factors C. And lastly, it is transitive. So transitive, what it means that R composed with R is contained in R. Okay? So by now I know what is an equivalence relation, and I am able to describe by now the atomic completion of the topos. Okay, so I am always in this situation. Okay, so this is a proposition, always under the same hypothesis. So the only hypothesis is the fact that the opposite category of C verifies the amalgamation property. Okay. So then here is the position. Under this hypothesis, the subcategory of the topos consisting of the atoms is equivalent to the following category. So first, we have to define the objects. The objects are pairs CR, where C is an object of the category C, and R is an equivalence relation in C cross C. Okay, so this is a definition of the objects of the category, and by now we have to say what is an euro. An euro from such objects, so we have to consider an equivalence relation on the first object C1 and an equivalence relation R2 on the second object C2, and we have to say what is a morphism in this category from the first question to the second question. So here, of course, we have to understand that this object is a quotient of C1, and this object is a quotient of C2. So if you consider a morphism from this quotient to this quotient, of course, its pullback will be a sub-object of C1 cross C2. Okay? And the sub-object, once again, is just a collection of atoms embedded into this product of C1 cross C2. So what does it mean? It means that such an arrow is a relation R on C1 cross C2, which of course has to verify some properties in order for it to define an arrow at the level of the quotients. So the properties to be verified are the following. First, R composed with R1 has to be contained in R. Secondly, R2 composed with R also has to be contained in R. Then R composed with the opposite of R, so the opposite of R is just the relation deduced from R by permutation of the two factors, C1 and C2. Okay? So R composed with the opposite of R has to be contained in R2, and in the other direction, the opposite of R composed with R has to contain R1. Okay, so this is an exercise to understand why it is a correct definition of the maps. So here you have a concrete description of the category of atoms. Maybe I can add a remark. Which is, so this is just a remark, this is the fact that E, the full category, the full topos, can be described very easily from the full subcategory of its atoms. So it is completely obvious why this is. So the objects. What are the objects of I? They are just collections of objects of E hat. So these collections, you write them, let's say, maybe EI, okay, indexed by some set, which may be finite or infinite. It is just a collection of such sets. And what are the arrows? The arrows, if you have such a collection of atomic objects, and you want to consider a map to another collection of atomic objects indexed by some other set J. What is an arrow from this to that? It is just, so these consist in maps alpha from the indexing set of the atoms here to the indexing set of the atoms there, plus morphism from the EIs to the E prime alpha I for any I. Okay, so the topos itself can be described from the subcategory of its atoms in this easy way. So you see that so here is a concrete description either of the atomic completion of the category C or of the full topos. And so, as Olivia has explained, so for instance, in all these cases, the toposes we built in this way are Galois. they are equivalent to toposes of actions of some groups. So here I would just I would just want to make the remark that when you make this concrete description, it is you don't see at all that this is Galois. So and probably so I think that when Olivia did this paper and talked to me, for instance, about finite groups, I was completely surprised because I didn't expect at all that there could exist some Galois theory of finite groups. But this is because when you try to do things concretely, you see this category is very easily defined, but you cannot guess it is Galois. And in order to guess it, you need really the topos theoretic interpretation. So. Okay, so just before I move to the other, before I move to the other subject, which is functoriality, I want. Yeah, maybe before, I want to make an extra remark, which in fact is useful in many concrete situations. It is the following. So it may happen, and in fact, in concrete cases, it very often happens that in the category C you start with, products are not defined, fiber products are not defined, but there are what can be called multi-products. So this is a definition, something which can happen or not in a category. You say that C has multi-products if the following conditions is verified. For any objects of the category C1, Cn, there exists a family of objects, so let's call them Di, indexed by a set, okay, endowed with a collection of maps. So these maps we call them F1I from Di to C1. Yeah, maybe I will write. So any Di is endowed with a collection of maps to C1, C2, Cn. So I call them F1I, F2I, Fni, such that for any family of maps from an object D to C1, C2, Cn, so for any such D, there exists a unique index I in our indexing set, and a unique morphism, a unique arrow from D to Di. So you call it. So this you call F. Here the map you call them F1, F2, Fn, such that F I is equal to F to F I. Oh, excuse me. So this, here I have to change the index. So maybe this I call yeah, so we have F1 is equal to Fi composed with F1i, okay, and the F2 equals Fi composed with F2i, and so on up to n. Okay, so you see the meaning is that for any such collection of maps, there is a unique factorization. And in fact, this is what happens in all the situations there. Okay, for instance, yeah, maybe I can. So let's consider the case of finite groups. So you have two cases to consider. So first, the case of finite groups and surjective homomorphism. So suppose you have such a finite group and a collection of maps, of surjective maps, G1, G2, Gn to G. So then you can certainly define the group, this group. Okay, so it is okay. You can certainly define this group, and when you have a collection of maps from another group H to oh yes, maybe here. Excuse me, I am just making things relative. But no. Excuse me. Suppose you have a collection of maps from G to G1, G2, Gn. Okay, and all these maps are surjective. Then you have an induced map from G to G1 cross G2 cross Gn. Okay, and of course this map is no more surjective. But you can consider its image. Okay, its image is embedded in here, and because you suppose that all these maps are surjective, you see that the projections on G1, G2, Gn of all the images are surjective. And in fact, this defines a multiproduct. Okay, so what the multiproducts here consist in considering of all subgroups of this product, which project surjectively on the n different factors. And you can do the same with finite graphs, finite sets. By now, for finite groups, the case of finite groups in the other direction is also interesting, but in fact, you will see immediately that it is more subtle. Because, so in that case, you have to consider embeddings, you see, of G1, G2, Gn, if in some group G. And of course, what you would want to do is to consider some type of universal factorization of that. So what you can do, of course, is to consider the free group generated by G1, G2, Gn, okay, and it certainly can be sent to G, and so if you have such a factorization, of course, what you will do is to consider the image of that. Okay. So this means here you have some image, and the image is embedded into G, and so it is a factorization. But so, what does it mean? It means that there are multiproducts. But what are the multiproducts? They are the quotients of this free group, such that the induced morphism from G1, G2, Gn to these quotients are embeddings. And in fact, in that case, you can easily convince yourself that there are infinitely many of them. Okay, so this means that here we have only finitely many such multi-products. Here we have infinitely many of them. Okay? So, how much time is left? Okay, so maybe. Okay. So, by now, okay, so what I want to say is so to say something about functoriality properties. So we consider a category whose opposite verifies the amalgamation property, so always the same. And by now, we know to associate to that a site, which is C endowed with the atomic topology. And we know to associate to that a topos, the topos of sheaves on C, together endowed with the atomic topology. Okay, we have denoted it E, or maybe EC, if we want not to forget C. And this contains the subcategory of atomic objects. By now, we can do the following, which is to localize our categories. So what does it mean? It means we consider an arbitrary object of the category C, and we can consider the relative category of C with respect to this object. Okay, so what it is the objects of this category are objects C prime of C endowed with a morphism. Okay, and the arrows between two such objects are just commutative triangles like that. Okay, and you can easily check that if the opposite of this category verifies the amalgamation property, then the relative category also verifies the amalgamation property. Okay? And so it is possible in this situation, you can associate to this relative category the topos of sheaves on this category endowed with the atomic topology. And you can easily verify that this is exactly the localized topos. So this is the topos we had before, localized at this object. Okay? So we have here, so I remind you that L, so it is still written here, it is the image of the object C in the topos. And as a matter of fact, when you have a topos, or you choose an object in the topos, then you can consider the subcategory of objects, of the relative category of objects endowed with a morphism to this object of the topos, and as a completely general fact, it is still a topos. Okay? So on this topos, in fact, is this one. So we have this morphism, which is relative, so the relative morphism, and here, as a general fact in the theory of toposis, we know that in this situation we have induced, an induced morphism between the toposes. So this means that here we have an induced morphism of topos from this localized topos to the absolute topos we talked with. So this morphism, by definition, consists of a pair of functors. Okay, so this is the direct image functor, which goes from this topos to that topos. This is its left adjoint, which is the pullback functor from the base topos to the localized topos. And as a general matter of fact, we also have that this functor has also a left adjoint. it has not only a right adjoint, which is this one, but it also has a left adjoint, which usually is written in this way. So, so in particular, of course, it is exact. It commutes with arbitrary projective and deductive limits. But here we have a direct image functor, which is not exact. So here I have written the morphism which is associated to the localization of a topos. But of course, I can do something more general, which is in the category C to consider an arbitrary euro f from an object C1 to an object C2. Then there is an induced functor from the localized category C over C1 to the localized category C over C2. And because of that, there is an induced morphism of toposis from the topos associated to localized at C1 to the topos localized at C2. Okay, so once again, we have this morphism of toposis, and this functor, the pullback functor, has not only a right adjoint f lower star, but also a left adjoint. Okay, so this is completely general. So you may think about these cases, and in all these cases, this general stuff applies. So this means, in particular, that, for instance, if you think about, for instance, finite groups, in fact, we have not only here we have associated toposis to any finite group, and in fact we have associated a topos, you have associated two toposis to any finite group. One toposis which is relative to surjective homomorphism, to the group you choose, and another topos which is associated to the embeddings of this group you choose in other groups. And all these toposis, for the reasons which Olivia has said, all these toposis are Galois toposis. So this means that for any finite group, for instance, you are able to associate to it a fundamental group. In fact, not only one, but two fundamental groups. And for instance, you may wonder, is there a relation between these two fundamental groups? We don't know at all to answer this question, but I think that this is really an interesting question. And it is not excluded at all that there are morphisms between these fundamental groups. Okay, and so you have this huge collection of Galois toposis, and you have these functors, in particular the direct image functors, which of course induce functors at the level of abelian categories. You consider the abelian categories consisting of abelian objects of the toposis, and of course there are induced morphisms, and this morphism, in fact, you quickly convince yourself that they cannot be exact. So this means that there are cohomological invariants associated to this situation. And so here there is, okay, so in this situation, you may wonder whether you are able to compute some of these invariants. So here we have chosen just to illustrate this example, but in fact, if you think about, if you think about other mathematical subjects, in particular, in every geometric situation, you have a notion of immersion or the notion of submersion. So this means there is an associated, there are associated atomic toposis, which most of the time are Galois toposis. And so, so presently we are working just to figure out what we can derive from all of this. We have just begun to do that. So personally, I am quite convinced that this could be really useful, so we are trying to apply that to algebraic geometry. So my basic feeling is that the Galois theory is very important, fundamental groups are very important, And so, as soon as there are so many new fundamental groups, I just cannot believe but this is a completely new subject. And for instance, I will give to you other basic questions, which, in fact, we didn't even answer, even though I am sure it is possible to do. But we didn't answer them because we have too many questions. And, just think about the case of finite sets, which is a basic example. So in the case of finite set, you have two atomic completions, one associated with submersions and one associated with immersions. So with the general terminology, this means that in this way are defined in two ways, imaginary finite sets. And for instance, as soon as you have objects in a category, an obvious invariant of these objects is the automorphism group. So if you think about finite set, of course you know what are the automorphism groups. They are the permutation groups, the symmetric groups, Sn. Okay? But here we have completed the collection of finite sets, which new objects, the imaginary finite set, in this completed atomic category, and these new objects, of course, have automorphism groups. And you can prove, in fact, in that case, that so it is quite easy to prove that the automorphism groups are finite. So, so this means that here appear new, some automorphism group, which, in some sense, complement the series of symmetric groups. And so I'm sure it will be very interesting to know which finite groups appear there, but we don't even, so far we don't even know. And maybe it will be interesting to give it to a computer just to make calculations. Everything here can be computed. And so you see, I have just given to you a few questions, but I think there are many more. And my basic feeling is that here there is a whole new theory to explore. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention.
Any questions or comments?
The process of making atomic completion is resembling like that making the calculus of algebraic space of the atomic schemes. But I guess that the category of étale site is not atomic. So I wonder if there is a more generalization of the process of atomic completion for any not necessarily atomic topos.
Yeah, but anyway, you have this general process of Grothendieck, so associating a topos to a site. So here, the particular interest is about Galois toposes. In fact, as Olivia has explained, toposes are extremely rich objects, and you can associate toposes to all geometric situations. So Olivia explains that you can associate toposes to any first-order theory. So they are extremely general, but of course the problem with toposes is that they are huge objects, and in general you never understand, you never fully understand or see a topos. You just see some it is like a huge world, which is almost a black world, and you just shed some lights on some particular aspects. But in the whole collection of toposes, there are some particular classes of toposes which you understand a little better. And in fact, it is not. It is exactly for this reason that Olivia gave as examples first a series of presheaf toposes, which means the toposes consisting of presheaves, which means contravariant functors, on a given category to the category of sets. So this, we understand more or less what it means. And the other class of toposes, which in fact is very familiar to us, which is, I would say it is the only class, as far as I am concerned, the only class where I really have the feeling that I understand what is the topos. So this is the topos of actions of a group. Okay, so this means that I think it is extremely natural first to look at this toposes because usually toposes are extremely complicated, but here they are less complicated, even though, of course, it has to be said that as everybody here familiar with Galois theory know, Galois groups are usually huge, we know only little on them, and so for instance, you see in number theory, people have studied Galois groups for 150 years, and the subject is still not exhausted. So this means that, of course, these groups immediately become very big, and here we are talking about fundamental groups, which in general are probably even bigger than the usual Galois groups of number fields or of global fields or local fields. So this means that exactly as in the case of number theory, probably we will never be able to fully understand these groups. But we can try to get some information, exactly as people do in the case of Galois groups of number fields or function fields or other étale groups or Poincaré group.
If not, let's start the speaker again.